All right, Kevin back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I am with my friend Michael F. Schein. Michael, welcome to the show, man. Awesome to have you here.
It is great to be here, Kevin. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you, you and I, we were connected by a mutual friend, Brandon Fong. And then as we were talking before we started recording here, we found out that we had another mutual friend in Michael Roderick. And it's really cool when we find out that when we have these mutual friends, because when we get connected that way, it's like, Michael, you and I, we just kind of talk like we've been friends forever, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Yeah, and I feel like we did hit it off in the pre-recording here.
Yeah,
when we were chatting a little bit.
You know what?
Yeah,
that is, see, and you know, one of the things I really have tried to do in this podcast is just, you know, the whole purpose is twofold: is to have the guests like yourself be able to share your story, your experience around this, and honor somebody who's had such a profound impact on your life and on your business. But for the listeners, I want to inspire them through this podcast to place a more intentional focus on creating more real, meaningful, rewarding, and profitable relationships. And so it's a real testament to the power of relationships when I get connected to somebody for this podcast, or for anything for that matter, when we can just hit it off so easily because we have these mutual friends that we have so much respect for. And there's power in that. There is serious horsepower in that. so welcome. Yeah, we were connected through Brandon, and you know, here we are. And what I'd like to do, I know you and I were talking a little bit before we hit the record button, but I'd like to just kind of turn over to you a little bit to share a little bit of your background, what you do, who you serve, what inspires you to do what you do, and just set a little bit of context and let everybody know, who is Michael F. Schein, and what is Michael all about?
sure. So my main gig, you know, what I wake up and do every morning is I run a company called Microfame Media.
Mm-hmm.
And in the broadest sense, we're a marketing company, although I don't often like to think of us that way because I was not a business person at all. And we'll probably talk a little bit about this. I'm really an accidental business person. But, you know, we work with we worked for many years with lots of consulting firms, because consultants are very idea-driven companies. We work the last couple of years with a lot of venture-funded startups.
Okay.
And what we work with them to do is to generate a huge amount of attention and emotion around their ideas in their niche, which is why we're called Microfame Media. We make them micro famous. We turn them into celebrities in their niche, not generally, so that they can accomplish their goals, which are often sales. The reason I bring up the whole accidental business person thing is that I wrote a book a couple years ago called The Hype Handbook that McGraw-Hill put out. And really, I'm a big believer in hype, not marketing. I think what marketing has come to mean, even though it shouldn't be this, is what buttons do you push on the right technology? You know, are you using HubSpot? Are you using Instagram or TikTok? Are you putting out content 3 times a week? But I think it comes from my background. I played in a lot of punk bands as a young person. And I was an artsy kind of person. I was a writer. I wanted to write novels. And wasn't a great musician, but we were really good at filling a room. You know, we used to have a residency at this popular club, and we would do anything. We talked our way onto Showtime at the Apollo just because we knew we would be booed off, and that got us lots of press. I mean, we did all kinds of. I used to dress like a nun and walk around, and so I got really fascinated when I became a freelance copywriter. And tried to go on my own after having a corporate job. I had become an adult and I tried to learn marketing. So I learned search engine optimization and funnels, and I almost lost everything. I mean, I was terrible at it. And then I realized what I used to do, and I started studying these characters, these people who would never in a million years think of themselves as marketers.
Okay.
Rock managers and propaganda artists and circus folk, you know. And I started using their strategies and it changed everything. I started generating all this attention and emotion. So what we do is we focus on mass psychology, and we say, what can we learn from anywhere and apply it ethically? And then the tactics come later. So I guess I would say we're a hype company. I'm a professional hype artist.
Nice, very cool. And like, yeah, I was, so give me an example. I mean, like how, an example that like really stands out in your mind of somebody you've helped through the work that you do, that like you just took them from one place to another place by using your skill sets and unique abilities.
Yeah. There's a great example that happened recently that I'm very excited about. There's a company called Pop-Up, and they raised, I don't want to give the wrong number, but millions of dollars on the basis of a really strong business plan and a track record. And it's essentially a new e-commerce platform for e-commerce entrepreneurs that's very, very flexible. So for Shopify, which is the gold standard, you set up a store, and it's a great tool. It's the gold standard. But what you can't do is go outside of their box. So if you need to put funnels that drive traffic into the system, you need to go somewhere else to do that. If you need to change sort of the general structure, you need to do that. So what companies like that often do, tech startups, is they focus on, well, look how great our tool is. It gives you all this robust flexibility. But one of the founders of their company is this guy, Matteo Grassi, who is Italian, from Italy. And he was a break dancer and a street performer and a really countercultural kind of guy. And so we came up with this idea. What we often talk about is, who do you pick a fight with? Not people, but what ideas do you pick a fight with?
Okay.
So we looked at all this entrepreneur advice out there, and it's all this kind of rah-rah, like, more power to these people, but Ed Milet, Tony Robbins, clean cut, take the world by storm kind of stuff. And we said, there's all these people who entrepreneurship is a vehicle for living an unconventional life. It's not about having a private jet, as Ed Milet likes to brag about his jet fuel. It's not like that. It's for someone who can't fit in. So we came up with this concept of Pop-Up is a platform as flexible as you are, meaning that everybody, if you're trans, if you live an unconventional lifestyle, if you're someone who did dumpster diving and never wanted to get a real job, whatever it is, this is for the freaks and the misfits out there.
Nice.
So they've gone full scale. He has a thing called Pop-Up TV. He went to Berlin and went to this frankly, this fetish community and dressed in a rubber dress. And he's this big 6'2" guy with a beard, and he was in this dress, and it got all kinds of viral attention, And the thing is, it's integrated. It's not just like, hey, we're going to do crazy stuff to do crazy stuff. It basically is a reflection of what their mission is, right? So that's the important thing. It's, you don't just clown around for the sake of clowning around. You think, what is the thing that gets me so worked up and so angry? What's missing out there in the world that I had to start this business? And then how do I weave that through everything I do? So there's a lot of examples like that, but that's one I've been really excited about because they're doing so well with it.
What a great example. What a great example. And it seems like it's just kind of a natural extension of that founder too, and who he is and just what he's all about, and so.
But they weren't going that way. That's the thing that people don't, right? They feel that he was smart enough. I mean, I don't mean it this way, but he came to us. He had read my book and he was like, I know I need to figure this thing out because we don't want to just do it the normal way. Mm-hmm. However, it's really tempting to say, my product is really good, so I'm just going to see what the client's pain is. And if we can fill that pain, solve that pain, people will obviously buy from us. And that's certainly better than talking about how great your product is, talking about them. But there's another level. People are not rational. People are seeking a sense of belonging. They want to transcend themselves. They want to pick sides. And we often forget that. We approach customers as if they're very, very rational. And that's where a lot of us experience very small incremental growth, if we grow at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's some really great insight right there for sure.
Thank you.
So I'm going to switch gears just a little bit here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reiterate the question for the benefit of the listeners. Have you ever been introduced to a person that completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person? And Michael, I'm really excited to hear your story, your experience around this.
Yeah, it's so when I left a corporate job that I hated but stayed there out of fear
Okay.
to come to New York, after having lived there in the past, coming back to New York and becoming basically a copywriter, because I was always a writer and got a lot of good attention for that. And I figured that this was an opportunity out in the world that I could do that. And I just assumed because I was good, it would work out. And it didn't, not at first. I came to New York and I was just grinding and working so hard and just really struggling. And so I was doing everything, going everywhere. And there was this thing called the New York Tech Council, which was kind of a trade group for technology in New York, what they call Silicon Alley.
Okay.
And even though I was like 32 years old with an infant, or 33 years old, I forget, I went there and I said, I'll do anything. I'll volunteer. And I remember they had me holding the clipboard at one of their events, getting people in the other side of the shared workspace not to take the food, from the, the event, the hors d'oeuvres. Like I was doing anything. So at a certain point, after winning their favor, I said to the guy who ran it, I was like, is you guys do these panels? Could I do an interactive marketing panel? And he said, well, I'll let you run the whole interactive marketing track. So I started booking these
Wow.
panels. So all this to say, there was this guy named Richard Larimer at my old company. And when I was in the marketing department working for the CMO, he had written a book called Punk Marketing. And as I said before, I like punk music. I like the whole punk aesthetic and that rebelliousness. And I always thought it was a really cool idea and a really cool book, and sort of looked up to this guy. He had this cool, interesting book that was published. And so I was trying to book people for this panel, and this random person I had met, this English guy, I don't even remember his name, I forget how we met, said, you should have my friend Richard Larimer on the panel. And I said, oh my God, that's the guy who wrote Punk Marketing. So I dropped him a line, and it turns out he's this really successful PR guy. He runs a company called RLM, and they do very strategic public relations campaigns. Like now they do Wondery, the podcast place. So I had him on the panel, and we just totally hit it off. And I don't know what happened. We just, ever since then, every so often we would meet for lunch. That turned into dinners. 11 years later, he's a close personal friend. And as I said to you before, not a business friend, like a friend. Like we
Yeah.
go see plays together, concerts, but he's also a mentor because he's probably about 10 years older than me. He's very successful. And at every stage in my career, I turned to him about what to do. Like I was struggling with kind of a right-hand employee who I found out wasn't good and was actually harming the company, but I felt very dependent on the guy. And I remember going to him and saying, Richard, what should I do? And Richard said to me, Mike, if going to work at your own business is a drag because someone is there, you do not want that person around.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, but he does this and he does that. He's like, could you handle it before him? And I fired him, and he raised a big ruckus. The guy, I found out, ended up he was stealing my intellectual property. He had stolen a little bit of money, but if I hadn't turned to him, it would have gone on 6 months longer.
Sure.
Like he just
Sure.
saw something, right? So at every stage in my career, over not this whole like formal thing, we'll be joking around, having drinks, having dinner, and I'll just throw something at him and he'll give me pivotal advice. And sometimes he just makes me feel better. There was a point in my career where I was thinking of giving up. I mean, we actually had an okay career year, the first half, but then the second half, how it goes. I mean, all our clients dried up, and I was like, why am I doing this, Richard? This is such a drag, this up and down. I mean, it's like I could make twice the money as a senior vice president of corporate communications, and he was like, I went through the same thing. I had to borrow money from my parents once. It was humiliating. He's like, you got to stick with it, this and that. And I did, and I wouldn't have if not for him. So just having someone like that in my life has been really cool. And I just like the friendship. He's really funny and a good guy. So
yeah. I really appreciate what you said. You made the distinction of like, there's friends, there's business friends, and then there's friends,
right.
And for you and Richard are friends, and you might talk about business as well. But you're right. I made a decision long ago that as far as like who I worked with, especially if I was going to work with anybody on any kind of a close project, or I didn't want to work with anybody that I wouldn't invite into my home for dinner with my family. And that was a decision I made years ago, and it served me really well. And because we talk about the two guys that you and I have as mutual friends, Brandon and Michael, and both of those guys, we do business together for sure, but those guys are great friends, and I would totally invite. In fact, I did an event in Seattle here last year, and Brandon came here for it, and so we got to spend some time in person.
So Brandon is a new friend. I and I really like him, but I'd have to still put him in the business friend category because here's how I would make the distinction, because I don't know him enough to put him. Sure. Michael is a friend, and the difference is someone in my family. I was at a work event, and someone in my family was having a hard time, a networking kind of thing at Meetup. Okay. We both know the guy who started Meetup. He invited us both, so we went, and I was ready to do the whole schmooze thing, and I got a phone call about a family member who was really struggling, and Michael saw my face kind of go white, and he was like, "What's wrong?" And I just started pouring my heart out to him. You know what I mean? And he was really there for me. Whereas there are a lot of business friends who will become that eventually, you know what I mean? But that takes time. And if everybody was that kind of friend, those friendships wouldn't mean as much as they do.
Totally.
And it's okay. It's okay to have people in your life that you just like and do business with, and who you would have at your home, but who you wouldn't talk about someone in your family's struggle with.
Yeah.
To me, I mean, that's me. I mean, everyone is different,
Yeah, totally. Yeah. We do what's right for us.
Yeah.
And so, and it's really cool, just kind of to have the experience, and like the experience you just shared with you and Richard, and some of the things that have come from that, and so what is something, I mean, you guys have been friends for quite a while. What is something that like really stands out that where because of the friendship that you and Richard have, that you guys were able, something substantial really happened that hands down would have never happened? Maybe it's an impact you guys were able to make together, or something, whatever stands out for you, that would have hands down would have never happened if not for your friendship with Richard.
I don't mean to evade the question, but it feels like in that case, it's an accumulation of little things that added up to a very big thing. So there are butterfly moments in my life. By butterfly, I mean, if the butterfly flaps their wings in Brazil, you get a hurricane in New York or whatever, I was working at my corporate job, writing fiction in the mornings, read a magazine called Writer's Digest, and there was an article by Bill Bly about writing white papers for money. And I never usually read the business writing articles, but happened to that day. And that was a life-changing thing. If I hadn't read that article, I would have never had the idea to write white papers, because I knew how to do that from work, that I knew there was a freelance market, and that led to everything. So that's one of those serendipitous moments.
Yeah.
With Richard, it's more like a combination of like, hey, how would you handle this management challenge? Hey, can you introduce me to, a graphic designer, because we're struggling right here, and I know they'll be good because I trust them. hey, the examples I gave, I'm struggling with this guy. He has all, can you give me good advice? I'm thinking of giving up on this thing. Can you talk me down from the ledge? I think that's just as important, as
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
people who give you the big opportunity.
Yeah. You bet it is. You bet it is. Yeah. And I really appreciate you taking the time to, have this conversation and just kind of, share your experience around this. Because you're right. The one thing that I have found over the years is relationships are the most valuable asset that we possess, and
Yeah.
everything else in life comes from that. And so, for anybody listening to this, Michael is like, man, Kim, I really like that Michael. I love the way he shows up. How can they find out more about what you're doing, your book, what have you?
Yeah, I think the best about me, and even indirectly what our business does, is to go to wherever you get books. These days, usually it's Amazon, and type in the Hype Handbook and buy that book, because I really do give away a lot of my secrets,
Okay.
and it's if you want to do it yourself, it's all in there. The company is called Microfame Media, microfamemedia.com.
Okay.
We are always looking to have conversations with people who want to generate that kind of attention and emotion that really gets them to kind of systematize just constantly having leads and sales, and we do it in a unique way. But ultimately, it's the people who read the book who get excited enough to give us a call, because
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
got the recipe. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Awesome. Well, Michael, any last thing you want to share before we call it a wrap?
I just want to say I really love your angle with this show. There are so many podcasts out there, and some of them are fantastic. They really are,
Mhm.
but they're interviews. You go on and you have a conversation, and it's sort of an all-purpose general business interview, and there's a real value in that. I listen to a lot of those,
Mhm.
but having a show that's hyper focused on relationships and letting people teach what they know by paying homage and appreciation to the people who really meant a lot in their lives. I just have to doff my non-existent hat to you, because it's a really unique, meaningful, cool thing, and I don't say that kind of stuff to everybody.
Well,
So
thank you for that. I am going to fully accept that. When this started because of a friend of mine, my good friend Brad Costanzo, who's hosted his own podcast for a number
yeah.
of years, was telling me, he's like, Kevin, for crying out loud, you're the relationship guy, man. You were a perfect guy. You would love doing this podcast. And he's right. This has been one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done. It's kind of and I've had so many entrepreneurs that I've interviewed that are like, man, nobody has ever asked me this question before.
Yeah.
And so it allows other people to see a unique side of them that they don't normally get to see, but just because they've never been asked this question before. And so it
I
has
agree.
been extremely rewarding, and it's been extremely rewarding just getting the feedback from people listening to it, and being able to let people honor and, like you said, show appreciation for the people that have meant so much to them. Because I can tell you, no matter how successful somebody is, no matter how great things look on the outside looking in, nobody gets too much appreciation,
Yeah,
And
I agree.
so,
I agree.
yeah, yeah.
Well,
Well,
great work. It's really neat. I love what you're doing.
well, thanks. And thank
I'm going
you.
to give you a swelled head before this is over. As my grandma used to, you're going to give him a swelled head.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you again, Michael, for taking the time to have this conversation today. Really appreciate it and look forward to sharing this with folks.
Thanks, Kevin.